A single photograph would destroy everything. Hidden beneath layers of family smiles and weekend barbecues, a secret so devastating that it would turn brother against brother-in-law in the most violent way imaginable. This isn't just another story about family drama gone wrong. This is about the moment when protective instinct collide with brutal reality and someone doesn't walk away. What do you think happens when someone discovers their loved one has been living a lie for years? Hold that thought, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why sometimes the truth is more dangerous than any secret. The Kellerman family reunion of 2019 was supposed to be a celebration. 3 generations gathering at Lake Winnebago for their annual summer weekend. Grandparents, cousins, the works. But for 34-year-old Damon Kellerman, this particular gathering would become the catalyst for a decision that would haunt him forever. Damon had always been protective of his younger sister, Brielle, the kind of big brother who checked under beds for monsters, who taught her how to throw a punch, who promised their dying father he'd always look out for her. When Brielle married Quinton Vega in 2016, Damon had his reservations. Something about the guy's too-perfect smile, the way he seemed to have an answer for everything. But Brielle was happy, or so it seemed. For 3 years, Quinton played the role perfectly. Successful marketing executive, doted on Brielle, brought expensive wine to family dinners. He had everyone fooled, everyone except the private investigator who'd been tracking his movements for months. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to that Friday evening in July, when Damon first noticed his brother-in-law acting strange. The way Quinton kept checking his phone during dinner. The hushed conversation that ended abruptly when others approached. The overnight bag in his car that he claimed was gym equipment. Here's what Damon didn't know yet. Quinton Vega wasn't just keeping one secret. He was keeping 3, and each one was more explosive than the last. The first secret would make Damon angry. The second would make him dangerous. But the third secret, the one hidden in that photograph, would make him a killer. Are you ready to find out what can push an ordinary brother past his breaking point? Because this story is about to take you places you never expected. Friday evening at the Kellerman family cabin started like every other reunion. Grandma Meredith fussed over the potato salad while Uncle Roy argued politics with anyone who'd listen. Children splashed in the shallow end of the lake as parents sipped beer from red cups. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary, exactly the way family gatherings should feel. Damon arrived late from his shift at the fire station, still smelling faintly of smoke and disinfectant. His wife Cassandra had stayed home with their newborn, so he came alone, looking forward to a weekend of fishing and catching up with relatives he only saw once a year. The first person he spotted was Brielle, laughing at something their cousin Tyler had said, her blonde hair catching the golden hour light. She looked genuinely happy, happier than she'd been in months. Actually, Damon had noticed the subtle changes in his sister over the past year. The way she'd started checking her appearance obsessively before Quinton came home. How she'd apologized for things that weren't her fault. The nervous laugh that replaced her genuine one when her husband made jokes at her expense. But tonight, with Quinton mixing cocktails by the dock and playing the charming host, Brielle seemed relaxed, almost like her old self. "There's my hero brother," she called out, wrapping him in a hug that smelled like sunscreen and vanilla perfume. "I was starting to think you'd bail on us again." "Never," Damon replied, squeezing her tight. Someone's got to make sure Quinton doesn't burn down the cabin with his fancy grilling techniques. Quinton looked up from the dock, that practiced smile spreading across his face. "Damon, just in time. I'm making my famous mojitos. The secret is muddling mint exactly 17 times. No more, no less." Everything about Quinton seemed calculated, from his perfectly pressed khaki shorts to the way he remembered everyone's drink preferences. He had a gift for making people feel important. Asking Uncle Roy about his recent knee surgery, complimenting Grandma Meredith's new haircut, high-fiving the kids when they cannonballed into the lake. But Damon caught the moments between the performance. The way Quinton's jaw tightened when Brielle mentioned their recent vacation to Cancun. How his phone buzzed constantly, and he'd glance at it with an expression that didn't match his jovial mood. The strange pause when someone asked about his work, as if he had to remember what story he was supposed to tell. Business has been crazy, Quinton explained when Grandma Meredith asked about his marketing firm. New clients, big campaigns. Sometimes I feel like I'm juggling 10 different projects at once. That's when Damon noticed the overnight bag. Quinton had parked his BMW near the cabin side entrance, and through the passenger window, Damon could see a black leather duffel bag on the seat. Not unusual for a weekend trip, except they were all staying until Sunday. Why would he need an overnight bag? Planning to hit the gym while you're here? Damon asked casually, nodding toward the car. Quinton followed his gaze, and for just a split second, his mask slipped. Confusion, then something that looked almost like panic before the smile returned full force. Oh, that old thing? Just some equipment I keep meaning to donate. Keep forgetting to drop it off at Goodwill. The explanation felt rehearsed, like Quinton had been practicing it. Damon filed the observation away, along with all the other small details that didn't quite add up. His training as a firefighter had taught him to notice inconsistencies. They usually meant someone was about to get hurt. As the evening progressed, those inconsistencies multiplied. Quinton excused himself 3 times to take work calls, each conversation conducted in hushed tones behind the cabin. When he returned from the 3rd call, Brielle asked if everything was okay, and his response was sharp enough to make her flinch. It's fine, Brielle. Not everything requires your input. The comment hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Family members exchanged glances, but no one said anything. They'd all learned to navigate around Quinton's occasional mood swings, chalking them up to work stress or the pressure of managing his successful career. Only Damon seemed to notice how Brielle's shoulders sagged slightly, how she suddenly became very interested in clearing empty plates from a picnic table. Later that night, as relatives began settling into their assigned sleeping arrangements, Damon found himself standing on the cabin's deck, staring out at the dock lake. The water reflected scattered stars, peaceful and infinite. But something felt wrong, that familiar sensation he got at fire scenes when the obvious cause didn't match the evidence. His phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. How's the family drama? Missing you and hoping you're having fun. He started to type back something cheerful, then stopped. How could he explain that his sister's husband seemed to be hiding something significant? That every interaction felt choreographed? That he had a growing suspicion the man his sister married might not be who he claimed to be? Instead, he wrote, Interesting weekend so far. Love you. What Damon couldn't have known as he stood there in the darkness was that Quinton Vega was already 3 steps ahead of him. The private investigator's report tucked inside, that duffel bag contained photographs that would change everything. And in less than 24 hours, those images would turn a protective brother into something far more dangerous than anyone at the reunion could have imagined. The stage was set. The players were in position. And the first domino was about to fall. Saturday morning brought the kind of perfect weather that makes family reunions memorable. Clear skies, gentle breeze off the lake, and the promise of a day filled with swimming, grilling, and the comfortable chaos of 3 generations trying to coordinate activities. But for Damon Kellerman, sleep hadn't come easily. He'd spent most of the night replaying Friday's interactions, trying to pinpoint why his brother-in-law felt like a stranger wearing a familiar mask. The answer came at 6:47 a.m., when Damon stepped outside for his morning coffee and caught Quinton loading that mysterious duffel bag into his trunk. Early bird today, Damon called out, keeping his tone light despite the suspicious timing. Quinton nearly dropped the bag, his startled response way out of proportion for someone doing innocent morning errands. Jesus, Damon, you scared me. Yeah, I need to run into town for some supplies. Brielle wants those fancy crackers for tonight's cheese board. But the grocery store didn't open until 8 a.m., and Quinton was clearly trying to leave before anyone else woke up. More concerning was the way he positioned himself between Damon and the car, as if blocking his view of something important. Need company? I could use a drive, Damon offered, testing the waters. No, no thanks. You should spend time with family. I'll be back before lunch. The conversation ended there, but Damon watched from the cabin's window as Quinton made a phone call before driving away. Even from a distance, he could tell it wasn't a casual chat. Too much gesturing, too much tension in his posture. Whatever Quinton Vega was dealing with, it had nothing to do with crackers or cheese boards. Brielle emerged from the cabin 20 minutes later, looking confused when she discovered her husband missing. He went to the store, Damon explained, studying her reaction carefully. Without telling me. She pulled her phone out, frowning at the blank screen. That's strange. He always tells me when he's going somewhere. The comment revealed more than Brielle probably intended. In healthy relationships, spouses don't require constant location updates. But in controlling ones, sudden departures create anxiety and confusion, exactly what Damon was seeing in his sister's expression. I'm sure it's nothing, Damon said, but privately he was cataloging another red flag. Want to help me get the fishing gear ready? We can surprise the kids with an early morning expedition. The distraction worked, and soon they were sorting through tackle boxes while reminiscing about childhood fishing trips with their father. For almost an hour, Brielle seemed like herself again, laughing at Damon's terrible jokes, sharing memories of the massive bass her dad claimed to have caught but never photographed. But when 10 a.m. came and went with no word from Quinton, her anxiety returned. He's not answering his phone, she said, trying to sound casual but failing. Maybe I should drive into town, check if his car broke down or something. Brielle. Damon set down the fishing rod he'd been untangling and really looked at his sister. When did you start worrying about every minute Quinton spends away from you? The question hit deeper than he'd intended. Brielle's face flushed, and for a moment, she looked exactly like she had at age 12 when he'd caught her sneaking cookies before dinner, guilty and defensive at the same time. I don't worry about every minute. That's ridiculous. You checked your phone 6 times in the past 10 minutes. He's been under a lot of stress at work lately. Big project, difficult clients. Sometimes he gets overwhelmed and makes impulsive decisions. I like to know he's okay. The explanation sounded rehearsed, like something she told herself repeatedly to justify behavior that deep down she knew wasn't normal. Damon recognized the pattern. He'd seen it in domestic violence calls during his firefighter training. The gradual erosion of independence disguised as caring. The way victims learn to monitor their partner's moods and movements to avoid triggering anger. Brielle, are you happy? The question came out more bluntly than he'd planned. She laughed, but it was that nervous sound he'd noticed the night before. Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask that? Quinton's a wonderful husband. He takes care of me, makes good money, always remembers my birthday. Most women would kill for a guy like him. The phrase takes care of me struck Damon as particularly telling. Not we take care of each other, or he makes me laugh, or any of the things people usually say about loving partnerships. She described her marriage like a business arrangement where she was a beneficiary rather than an equal participant. Before he could push the conversation further, car tires crunched on gravel. Quinton was back, emerging from his BMW with grocery bags and that $1,000,000 smile. Sorry I took so long. Ran into old college buddy at the store. You know how it is. One conversation leads to another. He kissed Brielle's cheek, and Damon noticed how she immediately relaxed at his touch. Got those crackers you wanted, plus some of that expensive cheese your grandmother loves. The story was plausible enough, but something about Quinton's energy felt different. More manic, like someone running on adrenaline and caffeine. His clothes were perfectly arranged, but there was a sheen of perspiration on his forehead that suggested stress rather than summer heat. Everything okay? Brielle asked, and there it was again, that careful tone people use when they're afraid of the answer. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Quinton's response was too emphatic, too bright. Actually, I have some exciting news. Remember that client I've been working with in Chicago? They want to meet next week. Could be huge for my career. Another work story, another convenient explanation for his distracted behavior. But Damon was starting to notice a pattern in these stories. They were always about future opportunities or past successes, never specific details about current projects. It was like Quinton was improvising his professional life in real time. The rest of the morning proceeded normally on the surface. Quinton helped set up the volleyball net, complimented Grandma Meredith's pancakes, and engaged in good-natured trash talk during the family cornhole tournament. But underneath the performance, tension crackled like electricity before a storm. Damon found himself studying every interaction, looking for clues to explain his growing unease. The way Quinton's smile never quite reached his eyes. How he deflected personal questions with jokes or compliments. The fact that despite being married to Brielle for 3 years, he still seemed like a guest at family gatherings rather than someone who truly belonged. But the most telling moment came during lunch, when 6-year-old nephew Parker asked Quinton about his job. "What do you do for work, Uncle Quinton?" "I help companies tell their stories," Quinton replied smoothly. "Make sure people know about their products and services." "Like commercials." "Sort of like commercials. Yay." It was a perfectly reasonable answer for a child, but Damon had worked with marketing firms during fire safety campaigns. He knew the industry well enough to recognize that Quinton's explanation was deliberately vague. Most marketing executives love talking shop, especially the successful ones who claim to have major clients and exciting projects. As afternoon approached, storm cloud began gathering on the horizon, both literally and figuratively. The weather forecast called for thunderstorms by evening, but Damon sensed a different kind of storm brewing within his extended family. Something was about to break open. And when it did, the carefully constructed world Quinton Vega had built around his marriage to Damon Kellerman would shatter into pieces sharp enough to cut deep. The question wasn't whether the truth would emerge. It was whether anyone would survive the revelation intact. What exactly was Quinton hiding? And why did Damon get the feeling that his sister's life might depend on finding out before it was too late? By 4 p.m., the promised thunderstorm arrived with vengeance. Rain hammered the cabin's metal roof while family members crowded inside, playing cards and sharing stories from decades past. The cozy atmosphere should have been comforting, but Damon felt increasingly restless as he watched Quinton field yet another urgent phone call from the covered porch. This time was different, though. Through the rain-streaked window, Damon could see his brother-in-law's animated gestures, the way he kept running his free hand through his hair, classic signs of someone under extreme pressure. More importantly, Quinton had left his regular phone on the kitchen counter. The device buzzing in his hand was completely different, a burner phone that raised serious red flags. Who keeps calling him? Brielle wondered aloud, settling beside Damon on the old leather couch that had witnessed countless family gatherings. "Work stuff, probably," Damon replied, but privately he was forming much darker theories. Drug deals, gambling debts, extramarital affairs, all scenarios that would require secondary communication devices and secretive behavior patterns. When Quinton finally returned inside, water dripping from his expensive polo shirt, his demeanor had shifted dramatically. Gone was the jovial host persona, replaced by someone who looked genuinely frightened. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" Brielle asked, reaching for his arm with the gentle touch of someone accustomed to soothing volatile moods. "Fine. Just client emergencies that can't wait until Monday." But his voice carried an edge that made several family members glance up from their card games. Damon decided to test his growing suspicions. Must be some client, calling during a family weekend. What kind of marketing requires Saturday emergency meetings? The question hit its target. Quinton's response came too quickly, with too many unnecessary details, another red flag from Damon's crisis management training. Automotive account. Big product launch next month, and the executive team is freaking out about competitor messaging. You know how corporate types get when millions of dollars are on the line. Which automotive company? Uncle Roy chimed in, genuinely interested. "I spent 30 years in car sales. Might know some folks there." Quinton's pause lasted exactly 2 seconds too long. "It's confidential. Non-disclosure agreements, legal complications. I could get sued just for mentioning the brand name." The explanation satisfied most of the room, but Damon caught the micro-expressions that betrayed panic beneath Quinton's confident exterior. Whatever crisis he was managing, it had nothing to do with automotive marketing or corporate product launches. As evening approached and the storm intensified, extended family members began their traditional migration to various sleeping arrangements throughout the cabin. Grandma Meredith claimed the master bedroom, cousins negotiated couch assignments, and parents corralled overtired children into makeshift sleeping areas. During this organized chaos, Damon noticed Quinton slip outside again, this time heading toward his BMW with purposeful determination. Through the rain-blurred window, he watched his brother-in-law retrieve something from the trunk. Not the duffel bag, but a manila envelope that he handled with extreme care. Curiosity finally overcame caution. Damon grabbed a rain jacket and followed, catching Quinton just as he reached the cabin side door. "Need help with anything?" Damon asked, his firefighter training kicking in as he assessed the situation tactically. Quinton spun around, clutching the envelope against his chest like valuable cargo. "Jesus Christ, Damon, what is wrong with you? Sneaking up on people." The reaction was completely disproportionate, aggressive enough to confirm that whatever was in the envelope was significant enough to defend violently. "I wasn't sneaking. Saw you struggling with something in the rain, and thought you might need assistance." "I don't need assistance. I need privacy. Can't a guy check his work emails without family members conducting surveillance operations?" But the envelope wasn't electronic communication. It was thick, physical documentation that someone had gone to considerable expense and effort to compile. The kind of package that contained photographs, financial records, or legal documents, evidence of something serious enough to justify hiring professionals. "Look, Quinton, if you're dealing with some kind of problem." "I'm not dealing with anything except overprotective in-laws who can't mind their own business." The words came out harsh enough to cut through rain and distance. "Maybe focus on your own marriage instead of analyzing mine." The comment was designed to wound, and it succeeded, but it also revealed how threatened Quinton felt by Damon's attention. Innocent people don't lash out when offered help. They don't carry mysterious envelopes or use burner phones or create elaborate lies about work emergencies. Before Damon could respond, Quinton pushed past him into the cabin, leaving him standing alone in the rain with confirmation that his instincts had been correct. His sister's husband was hiding something major, and that secret was creating enough pressure to crack his carefully maintained facade. Inside the cabin, family members were settling into evening routines, children being tucked into sleeping bags, adults sharing nightcaps and quiet conversations. The domestic tranquility felt surreal after the charged confrontation outside. Damon found Brielle in the kitchen, cleaning dishes with the methodical precision of someone using busy work to avoid thinking about uncomfortable realities. "Quinton seemed upset," she said without looking up from the sudsy water. "Did you two have words outside?" "Nothing serious. He's clearly stressed about work. He's been like this for weeks." The admission came quietly, like a confession she hadn't meant to make. Moody, secretive, taking calls at all hours. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living with a stranger." There was confirmation that Quinton's behavior had been escalating long before this weekend. Whatever crisis he was managing, it was serious enough to fundamentally change his personality within his own home. "Brielle, has he ever?" "Don't." She turned to face him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Please don't ask questions I'm not ready to answer. Not tonight." The plea broke his heart because it confirmed his worst fears. His sister was trapped in a situation she couldn't or wouldn't discuss, protecting someone who was clearly causing her significant emotional distress. That night, as thunderstorms raged outside and family members settled into sleep, Damon lay awake processing everything he'd observed. The secretive phone calls, the mysterious envelope, Quinton's increasingly erratic behavior, and most disturbing of all, his sister's obvious fear of confronting whatever truth she suspected about her marriage. But he had no idea that the envelope contained private investigator reports documenting not one but 3 separate deceptions. He didn't know that Quinton Vega wasn't just hiding secrets. He was actively planning to eliminate the people who might expose them. And he certainly couldn't have predicted that by tomorrow evening, someone in the Kellerman family would be dead, and his own life would be forever changed by what he was about to discover. What would you do if you suspected your sibling was in danger, but they refused to let you help? Comment below, because the choices Damon makes next will determine whether this family reunion becomes a rescue mission or a crime scene. Sunday morning brought deceptive calm. The storm had passed, leaving behind crystal-clear skies and the kind of pristine lake surface that makes everything seem possible. But inside the Kellerman family cabin, an entirely different kind of storm was about to break loose. Damon woke before dawn, his firefighter instincts pulling him from restless sleep. Something felt wrong, not the obvious tension from last night's confrontation, but a deeper disturbance that made his skin crawl. The cabin was too quiet, missing the usual sounds of early risers starting coffee or checking weather reports. He found Quinton's side of the bed empty when he passed the guest room. Brielle was alone, curled into herself like someone seeking protection even in sleep. Through the window, he spotted Quinton by the water's edge, hunched over his phone in what appeared to be an intense conversation. This time, Damon decided stealth was better than direct confrontation. He slipped out the back door, using trees and morning shadows to get close enough to hear fragments of the conversation. "Can't wait any longer." Quinton's voice carried across the still water. "Getting suspicious. Need to handle this the day before." The words cut off as Quinton noticed movement in his peripheral vision. He spun around, scanning the shoreline with paranoid intensity before ending the call abruptly. Damon retreated before being spotted, but he'd heard enough to confirm his worst fears. Whatever Quinton was planning, it involved immediate action and eliminating suspicion. The timeline suggested something would happen today, during the final hours of the family reunion when everyone's guard was down. Back inside the cabin, normal morning routines began as relatives stirred to life. Coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, children complaining about having to pack up their sleeping bags. But Damon couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching everyone for the last time, that this ordinary Sunday morning was actually the calm before catastrophic violence. Quinton returned from his lakeside phone call with renewed energy, almost manic in his enthusiasm for the day's activities. "Who's ready for one final fishing expedition?" he announced, clapping his hands together with theatrical excitement. "I was thinking we could take the boat out to the deep spots, maybe catch something worthy of bragging rights." Uncle Roy perked up immediately. "Now you're talking. I've been wanting to try those northern pike spots all weekend." "Perfect. Just a small group, though. Don't want to overcrowd the boat. Maybe you, me, and Damon. Leave the wives to enjoy some peaceful girl time." The suggestion seemed innocent enough, but Damon caught the calculating look in Quinton's eyes. He was engineering a scenario that would separate him from witnesses, get them out on isolated water where anything could happen. "Actually," Damon said carefully, "I promised Brielle I'd help her pack up the kitchen supplies. Maybe later this afternoon." Quinton's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of frustration before the smile returned. "Come on, man. How often do we get quality bonding time? I feel like we got off on the wrong foot last night." The apology felt strategic rather than genuine, designed to lower Damon's defenses and make him more compliant. Classic predatory behavior. Create conflict, then offer reconciliation to regain control of the situation. "Maybe we should all go," Brielle suggested from the kitchen doorway. "Make it a real family adventure." "The boat only holds 4 people safely," Quinton replied quickly. "Besides, you hate fishing. Remember last time? You spent the whole trip worried about the hooks and the fish suffering." He was isolating her, making decisions about her preferences and activities. Another red flag that confirmed Damon's growing suspicions about the true nature of their marriage. That's when Damon made a choice that would change everything. Instead of continuing to gather evidence or trying to protect his sister through careful observation, he decided to force the truth into the open. "Quinton, can I talk to you privately? About last night?" "Sure, buddy. Clear the air between us." They walked out to the deck, where morning sunlight created long shadows between the cabin and lake. Damon could feel other family members watching through windows, sensing tension but not understanding its source. "I know you're not a marketing executive," Damon said without preamble. "I know whatever's in that envelope isn't work-related. And I know you're planning something today that involves getting me away from my sister." Quinton's reaction was immediate and telling. No confusion, no request for clarification, just cold calculation as he evaluated how much damage this revelation might cause. "You don't know anything," he said quietly. "You're a small-town firefighter playing detective with situations way beyond your understanding. Then explain it to me. Help me understand why my sister looks terrified half the time, or why you carry burner phones, or what kind of work emergency requires private investigators." The mention of private investigators hit like a physical blow. Quinton's face went completely white, confirming that the envelope contained exactly what Damon had suspected: professional surveillance reports documenting activities that Quinton desperately wanted to keep hidden. "You've been watching me," Quinton whispered, and for the first time, genuine fear crept into his voice. "I've been watching you hurt my sister." What happened next would replay in Damon's mind for the rest of his life. Quinton reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black object, not a weapon, but something potentially more dangerous: a syringe filled with clear liquid. "This conversation is over," Quinton said, his voice taking on a flat, emotionless quality that was somehow more terrifying than shouting would have been. "You're going to walk away, pack your things, and leave my wife alone, or I'm going to make sure you have a very unfortunate accident on the lake today." The threat was specific enough to be credible, and the syringe suggested Quinton had come prepared for exactly this confrontation. Whatever was in that needle wasn't intended for medical purposes. It was meant to incapacitate or kill. Damon realized with crystalline clarity that his brother-in-law wasn't just hiding secrets. He was a predator who had been systematically destroying his sister's life, and now he was ready to commit murder to protect his carefully constructed lies. The question was no longer what Quinton was hiding. The question was whether Damon could expose the truth before his sister became the next victim of whatever deadly game her husband had been playing all along. Time was running out, and somewhere in that manila envelope were answers that could save Brielle's life, if Damon could survive long enough to find them. The syringe changed everything. In that moment, Damon understood he wasn't dealing with a cheating spouse or financial fraud. He was facing someone capable of premeditated murder. The clear liquid inside that needle represented a calculated willingness to kill family members to protect whatever secrets lay hidden in that manila envelope. "You're insane," Damon breathed, taking a step backward on the deck. "I'm practical," Quinton corrected, his voice carrying the cold detachment of someone who'd already made peace with violence. "Your sister has a beautiful life. Comfortable home, financial security, social status. Why would you want to destroy that for her?" The question revealed the twisted logic that had been driving Quinton's behavior. In his mind, maintaining Brielle's ignorance was an act of kindness, even if it required eliminating anyone who threatened to expose the truth. What's in the envelope, Quinton? Insurance. Evidence that ensures certain people stay quiet about certain activities. His grip on the syringe tightened. "But you've made that arrangement complicated." Before Damon could respond, the deck door opened and Brielle stepped outside, coffee mug in hand and concern etched across her features. "Is everything okay? You two look serious." The timing couldn't have been worse. Quinton's eyes flicked between siblings, calculating odds and measuring distances. With Brielle present, his options had just multiplied. He could threaten her to control Damon, or eliminate both problems simultaneously. "Everything's perfect, sweetheart," Quinton said, slipping the syringe back into his pocket while maintaining eye contact with Damon. "Your brother and I were just discussing that fishing trip." But Damon had reached his limit. 3 years of watching his sister diminish herself, 3 days of observing calculated manipulation, and now facing direct death threats. It was too much for protective instincts to bear. "Brielle has been lying to you about everything. His job, his phone calls, probably his entire identity. That envelope contains evidence of crime serious enough that is ready to kill us both to keep them hidden." The words tumbled out faster than strategic thinking could stop them. Quinton's face transformed from concerned husband to pure predator in the space of a heartbeat. "You stupid bastard," he snarled, reaching for the syringe again. "You just killed your own sister." What happened next unfolded with a terrible clarity that emergency responders recognize in life-or-death moments. Quinton lunged toward Brielle, needle extended, while Damon launched himself across the deck in desperation. The collision sent all three crashing into the deck railing. Wood splintered under the impact as bodies tangled in a frantic struggle for control of the weapon. Brielle screamed, the sound carrying across the lake and alerting family members inside the cabin. Damon managed to grab Quinton's wrist, fighting to keep the syringe away from his sister. But Quinton was stronger than expected, fueled by the desperate energy of someone with everything to lose. You don't understand what you're destroying. Quinton gasped, driving his knee toward Damon's ribs. She's better off not knowing. Knowing what? Brielle cried, pressed against the cabin wall as the men fought just feet away. That's when the manila envelope fell from Quinton's jacket, spilling photographs across the weathered deck boards. Images that revealed the first secret, Quinton with another woman, intimate moments captured by professional surveillance equipment. But the affair was just the beginning. Additional documents showed financial records, false identification papers, and most damning of all, police reports from 3 different states where Quinton Vega had been investigated for domestic violence, fraud, and one suspicious death of a previous wife. "Oh my God," Brielle whispered, staring at evidence of the man she'd married. "You killed someone." "She was going to leave me." Quinton roared, momentarily distracted by his wife's horrified expression. "Just like you're threatening to do now." The confession was all Damon needed. Using Quinton's emotional outburst, he twisted the syringe away and drove his elbow into his brother-in-law's solar plexus. The impact doubled Quinton over, gasping for breath and clutching his stomach. Family members burst through the deck door, Uncle Roy, cousins, even Grandma Meredith wielding a cast-iron skillet like a weapon. The cavalry had arrived, drawn by Brielle's screams and the sound of splintering wood. "Call 911. Damon shouted, keeping Quinton pinned to the deck while securing the syringe. "Tell them we have a suspected murderer in custody." But Quinton wasn't finished. With the loss of his strength, he rolled toward the deck railing, trying to escape into the lake below. The railing, already damaged from their earlier impact, gave way completely under his weight. The fall should have been survivable, only 12 feet to shallow water. But Quinton's head struck the boat dock with a sickening crack that echoed across the lake like a gunshot. Silence followed. Then Brielle's broken sobs as she stared at a photograph that revealed 3 years of lies, manipulation, and calculated deception. The husband she defended, worried about, and loved had been a predator, using her as cover for increasingly dangerous criminal activities. Emergency responders arrived within 20 minutes. Paramedics, police, and eventually federal agents who'd been tracking Quinton Vega across multiple jurisdictions. The syringe contained enough potassium chloride to stop 2 human hearts, confirming that he'd come prepared for multiple murders. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of his deceptions. Quinton's real name was Marcus Webb, wanted for questioning in 4 suspicious deaths spanning a decade. His marketing career was a front for identity theft and financial fraud. The private investigator reports documented his search for the next victim, a wealthy widow in Minneapolis who'd been corresponding with him online. Brielle had unknowingly married a serial killer who specialized in targeting vulnerable women, gaining their trust, and then eliminating them when they became suspicious or threatened to leave. She'd survived 3 years only because a family's protective presence made murder too risky. Until this weekend, when desperation and exposure forced Marcus Webb to attempt eliminating multiple witnesses simultaneously. The Kellerman family reunion that was supposed to celebrate togetherness instead became the scene where a predator's carefully constructed world finally collapsed. But it also became the moment when protective love proved stronger than calculated evil. Damon saved his sister's life, but the cost was enormous. Brielle spent months in therapy, rebuilding a sense of trust and self-worth. The family dealt with guilt over missing warning signs and relief that tragedy was averted. But they also learned something powerful about the bonds that connect people who truly care about each other. When someone you love is in danger, you don't hesitate. You act, even when the consequences might destroy everything you thought you knew. The case may be closed, but some questions remain. How many other families are living with hidden predators? How many warning signs do we miss because we want to believe the best about people we care about? What do you think happened? Could this tragedy have been prevented if someone had acted sooner? Comment below, and if you find this story interesting, please subscribe, like, and share for more crime stories.